You are listening to the Novel Writing Podcast, episode 222. I'm your host, Colleen Mitchell. Grab a cup, cozy up, and let's get to writing. Today I'm talking with Caitlin Shetterly again, this time on what it means to be a resilient writer in the face of continual health problems. So, Caitlin, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I don't necessarily think of myself as having continual health problems.
Well, I
I
mean,
just keep going.
diabetes, cancer.
So many, yeah, just those small things. I bat them away and keep going.
I know. So last time we had you on, it was July of 2024, so a couple years ago now, and that was all the way back in episode 136. So for new listeners, can you remind us about who you are, what you write, and what has happened in the last couple years?
Sure, yeah. My name's Caitlin and I live in Maine. I grew up in Maine. My husband grew up in Maine. We went away, we came back. We have two sons whom we adore. We live on an old 250-year-old money pit farmhouse that backs up to 150 acres of nature preserve and a salt marsh, and that's wonderful. We love it. And we just live a really simple life. We are really committed to not being huge acquirers of things or even acquirers of experiences. We try to just stay really present in our lives here and on the land we live on. But I've written 5 books. Let's see, I think Fault Lines, Made for You in Maine, Modified, Pete Nels in Maine. This is my 5th book coming out. And I'm starting a 6th now. And in 2020, during the pandemic, I had been actually writing another novel for a long time that I couldn't bring across the finish line. I still, when I think about it, I get this sort of like icky feeling inside me. Like I know that I should go finish that book and I still feel really badly because there's a lot that's so good about it. And also it's a story I had carried around since I was like in high school. And then the second part of it came to me in the early aughts. And so I feel like I have this responsibility to go finish that book, but I kind of don't know how to. Regardless, in 2020 I wrote a novel very quickly that just came to me one night while my husband was asleep. And it's called Pete and Alice in Maine, and it came out in 2023. And then you and I were on for my paperback, I think, in 2024. And that's a book about a couple that comes to Maine sort of in that great migration that happened with people from the cities coming to places like Montana or Maine and, coming to country towns and staying either in their second houses or renting Airbnbs and sort of the fear that a lot of people felt and how they were trying to get away from COVID. My contention was, and why I wanted to write the novels, because Dan and I, my husband and I, are both from Maine. And we were seeing a lot of these license plates coming in with New Jersey or New York or Massachusetts plates. And it was really hard for us in the beginning. It made us mad because, Maine is actually a very poor state, not what you see of the coasts and what you see in magazines. And we didn't have enough hospital beds, enough ventilators. We have an aging population. And those of us who live here, we were being rationed. Like the grocery store was only giving each family 2 rolls of toilet paper a day out the back. You had to sign for it. I mean, so it just felt like these people from away with more resources were coming in. And I read this story in the paper about the island of Vinalhaven off the coast here and how some locals had cut down trees to entrap some people who had come from somewhere, I don't know, DC or New York or somewhere, and they were in their summer house. And to force that family to quarantine for 14 days, they felled trees across their driveway. And that just must have really like gotten something churning in my head. And I think I tend to be a very empathetic person. And even with some of the most evil characters in the world, I do think it's a useful exercise to ask yourself, are they always evil, or is there goodness in everybody somewhere? And so I was really, and these people weren't evil, I'm not saying that, but I was really interested in like, well, what does that feel like? And so I was down at the fridge and I wrote, this voice came to me and I started to write this story, which became a novel about this couple that comes to Maine with 2 daughters, and they shelter in place, and they've brought their problems, their family problems, their marriage problems with them. And I really wanted to think about like, what are we trying to find refuge from and why? And like, it can't just be COVID that's making all these people come. So anyway, fast forward, I wasn't quite done with those characters. So about a year after I finished that book and it was all done and it was going to come out in a year, I was in France with my husband and sons, and I had left Pete and Alice on a cliffhanger. And suddenly I wanted Alice to come to France. I wasn't quite done with my character Alice, but more importantly, I actually wasn't done with her two daughters, Iris and Sophie. I have boys, but of course I was a girl, and I've known girls, and I've observed other people's daughters. And I really was interested in writing some more of these daughters. Maybe because I didn't get a daughter in a weird way, I got to kind of make these girls and make them very familiar to me and use bits of myself or see bits of myself mirrored in them. So in a, in a sort of a weird, what is it? My Fair Lady kind of way, I was sort of making my own, Pygmalion and Galatea kind of way. I was making my own creation. But I set it in France, and Alice, as you know, has had cancer in the second book. And she's trying to find herself again. And she gets assigned an article that's like for a magazine like Outside Magazine. And they're doing a big push on women and girls in the outside, doing stuff. And she gets assigned this article to camp across France and with her daughters and write about it. And they're going to pay her like $5,000, and they're going to, do a front page thing. And it's all this funding that they've gotten that's like a female initiative. And so she decides to say yes. Now, this is a woman who's been terrified and very alone. Like cancer is a very lonely experience, and she's decides to do it and goes off to do that and finds she lives kind of joyfully, recklessly, carelessly. She makes a lot of mistakes, and it's a journey. And towards the end, something happens at the end of the book, and she has to kind of figure out what she believes in. But I wrote that book because I had spent years and years reading out loud to my sons, and reading as a young reader myself, and then reading out loud to my sons and realizing, oh my God, here's another dead or dying mom. Like every book, right there. And then as an adult too, it's like there's the big, what is it? The big C, terms of endearment, like more recently dying for sex. Like whenever anyone is given cancer in just about every novel, especially the mother, she is dead as a doornail, definitely by the end of the book, and usually earlier. And if the book's for kids, they take the mother away fast, like dispatch with her, off with her head, we're done. The kid's going to be alone and miserable, and then find, Narnia or whatever. I mean, not that there weren't any dead mothers in Narnia, but, Harry Potter or any of these books, there's always a dead mom. So I was like, we used to joke about it, my kids and I, right? We would laugh, and it was like, oh, here's another dead mom. And, it's like they would tease me. But I'm guessing that we were all sort of uncomfortable with it. It was like this was putting right in our faces, like your mom could die. And so it always made me, and so I wanted to write a novel where the mother survives and she's trying her damnedest to thrive. It's interesting because it's a funny mix, right? She's Gen X, and a lot of us Gen Xers really are very intentional parents, and we're trying to right all the wrongs of our own childhood and be perfect and work and cook and mother and this and that, right? And have careers. But I think I also borrowed things from like the 70s and 80s childhood that I grew up in, which was a little looser and a little more like likely for parents to be selfish. So I was interested in like this idea, like if a mother's trying to survive and thrive and starts to make mistakes kind of like right in front of her daughters when she is finally set free. She's also had a husband who's cheated on her. Like, what is that story? And what is it like to thrive sort of messily and recklessly until you kind of like are like, okay, I'm actually alive enough that I don't have to make chaos. I can just be. So these were some of the questions I was playing with. So I handed that book in October of 2024, and and then 6 months later, I myself was diagnosed with breast cancer, and in the exact same breast and the exact same kind of cancer I had researched for my character. What was insane about that was that I had meticulously researched this. Like I had, having struggled with diabetes, that was sort of my, that's why it's so good to talk to you, Colleen, because I think you'll understand better than anybody else. I really had used my diabetes as my foundation. I can't even really explain all this to really anywhere on any other podcast or anywhere else because it's too many complicated medical stories, but I can explain it to you because you'll get it, which is that like I had already had a physical crisis. And I already have this disease, which I have to think about all day long, every day, no matter if I want to or not. And it's not like having a sore hip or a sore knee. You are constantly intervening to save your own life every day as a diabetic. Like, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I really kind of knew that. And so I decided to think about breast cancer and like my grandmother died of breast cancer. I was really interested in it and I did all this research and I used all that sort of aloneness of a medical problem to create this character in this life and how alone she feels going through this because no one can take it away for her. At the end of the day, you're alone and it's only your body going through this. And so it was really a shock for me when I found this out. I I've written a little bit about this now and I'm starting to talk about what was really hard for me is that I had essentially like an existential crisis because I had broken this fourth wall between myself and my character and I thought I had really made this all up and then all of a sudden I had it too. And the only person in my life who seemed to really understand what I was going through was my imaginary friend, Alice, right? So that was a little weird. And I kind of lost hope. And then I lost faith. And I really had a hard time. And I think that hope finally came back sort of in the summer because I had this really great group of friends that drove me to radiation. And something about that solved some things for me just for my whole life, but also I don't know. They sat really close to me. They were totally present with me. And that it did something. It changed something for me. But faith, I feel like, is a daily practice. And I, it was a really extraordinarily scary time. There were all these terrible things going on in the world at the same time. And in some ways, my cancer felt like this footnote to all that. And I was already afraid of a lot of the things that were happening in this country to marginalized people. And then, and I really wondered when you're really up against it, or when you're a 5-year old, you've been put in a detention center or something like, is hope available to you? And if it, and what good does it do you? Or is it actually scarier to hope? I really wondered that for myself. If I hope for things, is that actually scarier for me? Because then I'm wanting something. I don't know. So it was a question. And it's one I still keep asking and thinking about and, trying to find peace with.
So as weird as it was for your only the only person to really connect with you over that being your imaginary friend Alice, as weird as that was, did it help to have the character who had gone through the exact same thing to kind of lean on?
That's such an interesting question. Like, if you ask me, I would say no. If you ask one of my best friends, Rachel, she'll say yes, it did, which is interesting because she feels pretty strongly that because I had already thought through all this and like gone there with a lot of it, that I had somehow paved a bit of the road for myself to not get as rattled by it. I don't know because this is what happened, right? I don't know what the alternative would have been, but I didn't have that one. And I don't know. Certainly given me something interesting to talk about.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
'Cause I don't know how many other people can say they wrote a character with particular health problem and then 6 months later the author themselves gets that exact same health problem.
I know. I mean, I bet it's happened more than we know, but you know,
Maybe.
maybe you presage, maybe you can feel it. I just don't know. Or maybe it's just luck of the draw, or maybe I'm good at slipping into another person's carrot shoes and then this was already brewing. I really have no idea, but I will tell you something interesting is that when I got the book back after all my radiation and everything in the last fall, I the first thing I did is I got the manuscript and I like skipped through it to all the cancer parts. I was like, okay, well, literally, I've just been through this. I better make sure because I don't want any woman to pick this up who's had any whiff of breast cancer and be like, yeah, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, because
Or
then
like that.
you have the lived experience now.
Yeah. And she was like, I was like, I don't want her to feel like any bit of it is false. But you know what? I didn't change a word about the cancer. That I had gotten right with the research and just knowing what it's like to have a health problem and to be afraid and to know that it can come back.
But
Yeah.
also to bring that around to the craft side, that goes to show that as authors, we can research a topic enough as though we had actually gone through it or actually we know it. You don't have to experience these things to be able to write them well, is what I'm saying, but because you've lived through the
Exactly.
experience and then gone back and didn't change a word.
We really can make things up. And you know, the way you do that, in my opinion, as a writer, as a fiction writer, is you have enough things that are factual to underpin what you make up. So, for instance, like in Pete and Alice, you won't remember this because it's a tiny moment, but like I use this as an example. There's a moment when Alice and Pete are at Pete's Westport family home, and there's a baseball game on, a Dodgers and somebody else baseball game. That baseball game really happened that summer on that day in July or June or whatever it was. And really at that time of night, and the outcome was the same, you know, and really Harry Potter, the advanced copy that she's reading upstairs, really was published a little while later. Those kinds of things. You know, I read a book about Maine once, and there was a grizzly bear getting trash out of a dumpster. Now, of course, we don't have grizzly bears in Maine. We only have black bears. And so, you know, cool idea. But the minute you put that there, you've lost me. So, underpinnings of fact really do help build the story, the fiction.
It's funny you say that because the episode that I just recorded for I think it's this coming Tuesday, which by the time you all hear this will have been months ago. But that episode I was talking about how to do research and like research matters and the details matter. And if you get something wrong, then readers are going to lose trust immediately.
They lose trust immediately. They want to throw the book over their shoulder.
Yep.
Yeah, no, it's
Or across
totally
the room into a wall.
totally, because you can't, if they don't trust you, if they think that you're bullshitting them, they won't feel like they can be vulnerable. It's a relationship at the end of the day. If you can't trust, you can't be vulnerable. And when do we, most of us read, women anyway, especially, in bed at night with our partner snoring next to us when we're totally alone and vulnerable, right? I feel like that's, or alone in our beds, whatever, you know, in vulnerable moments. Like when I was in acting school, I had an acting teacher. One of my favorite things that we did was called a private moment in a public space. And it was like, you know, the person reading the novel on the subway who's like totally, you can tell by their face, they're totally dropped in. And they are vulnerable because the world is going on around them. The doors might open, might miss their stop, but they're in this world.
It reminds me of the picture of a girl on maybe it was a video. It was a picture or a video of a woman on a flight, and she's reading like the last few pages of this fat book, and she's got tears just running down her face. And it's like you're on an airplane, you're crying at the end of the book. That is like one of the most vulnerable things you can do in a crowded like tube of strangers. But readers understand that yeah, that's what happens when you get into a book and when you connect with the characters. Like, if what they're going through is so emotionally powerful that you cry in a public space, like that author has gotten it.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. The end of a book, oh my God, that in our family, that's like sacrosanct. Like, don't bother the person finishing a book. Do not bother them. Leave them alone. Don't talk to them. Do not touch their door. Don't play Legos outside their door. Whatever it is, they're finishing a book. There are so few things like that, right? At the end of a book that you've been loving.
So now that you have gone through this diabetes diagnosis, this cancer diagnosis, and you're in recovery, not remission yet. I think we talked about that before we started recording. But now that you're writing your sixth book, what systems or routines have kept you going back to the writer's desk with all of these things that you have to constantly think about?
I don't know why anyone does this, but I like writing is hard and it requires that your brain be sharp, right? So let me tell you a little bit about how not sharp my brain is at this point. So because I'm taking tamoxifen, which is a hormone suppressant, I it makes me really tired. And I'm playing around with the dosage of it because I went to the full 20 milligrams of it, which is like the dose they want me on over Christmas and January. And it made me very stuck, like very slow, like no energy. Everything was seeming really dire and like just, I couldn't even call people back. I was a little hopeless. So then they took me back down and now they're giving me a microdose of Zoloft, which gives me a tiny bit of energy, oddly. But I'm still tired, and tamoxifen makes it hard for you to sleep. All of this is a long way of saying I take a nap every day, like I'm like 85, and I just can't wait to take a nap. Oh my God. I all day long, I'm like, when do I get to take my nap? I feel like my creative brain on time is smaller than it used to be. My brain is sharper for shorter periods of time. And I do think a lot of my available brain space is taken up with, it's not worry really. It's just more like there's this thing there, and I know it's there. We all know it's there, and it takes up some space. But I will also say that I've always been a spurts writer. I feel like this idea of writing every day for 2 hours, maybe I'm wrong. I mean, I don't know in your case, actually. I'd love to hear. But I do think that's like a notion for men, delivered for men, because I feel like especially men with families, houses, partners, whatever, it was expected, or it is expected, or for somehow men can go and write for 2 hours and they don't have a million other things they're also doing. And it's not expected of them quite the same way, or hasn't been historically, let me say. So I feel like this sort of up in the garret writing, no one bothering them, it being quiet, etc. I mean, that is just not my experience of being a writer and also being a mother and a homemaker and everything else. Chief driver, it's hard for my kids to understand that I'm writing, that to not burst in. And I think being a mother is a very permeable boundary period. So I write in short spurts. And I do believe, and I say this, and I will set my life on this. You can write a whole novel in 15 minutes a day. And I'm not the only one who believes this. Andre Dubus, who wrote House of Sand and Fog, he was a carpenter. He was banging nails when he wrote that, and he wrote that for 15 minutes with his first cup of coffee before he got out of the car and was building houses for people. He
And I
was like,
think Neil Gaiman wrote Coraline in 10 minutes, like increments over like a decade.
right. So, I mean, that's how I wrote Pete and Alice during COVID while teaching my kids homeschooling for a year, our own curriculum, because neither of my children would do the online thing. So I still kind of work that way. I mean, I've started this new novel. I've written a short story. I'm writing essays to go out with the publication of the book. But I don't even try if my brain isn't really there. I'll go and give myself the break. I'll go lie down. I'll go read somebody else for a little while. I don't look at a screen, but I'll go because that actually does the opposite. It does not give me energy. But I'll make some tea, I'll lie down, I'll look out the window, and then I'll come back because I need to be refreshed. I also do a lot of my writing while I'm running or walking. So like I will finish a whole story in my head and then I'll come back and be like, and this and this and this, and I'll try to remember it as I'm running. Because I feel like some of the best work gets done when you actually walk away from the work.
Yeah, because then your brain is able to figure out the problems without you actively thinking about it. But you can also actively think about it, and the movement helps that those brain juices flow.
Yeah, I will set myself a task sometimes and be like, I'm going to figure out this while I run. And I usually do. It'll happen that, sometimes I bring a piece of paper and a pencil in my pocket, or sometimes I bring a notebook, or sometimes I just force myself to remember it as sort of a mental exercise.
Yeah, I've done the same thing where I go on hikes. It's been a while since I've done this, but I'll go on a hike with a specific problem in mind that I want to solve. And then as I'm thinking about it, once the answer starts coming, I'll record it into my phone.
Yeah.
And then I just have that stream of consciousness to listen back to or read the really terrible transcription of later. And then I have to decipher my own thoughts. But it really helps break through the problems.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. You can't do it all sitting in a chair.
All right, as we wrap up, if
Yeah,
listeners remembered just one thing from this episode, what would you want that to be?
I really think it's very important to write with full empathy. And I also think it's really important to make sure you've checked all your facts and underpin stories with the real world, the true things. And then you can go off from there. But make sure you've understood the systems that make things work or not work, or even if you've entirely made it up and it's fantasy, check that system that every bolt of it sort of fits together, right? And then, I mean, I just think writing with empathy, as I was just saying, like really trying to put your full heart into someone else's shoes. We need more empathy in the world anyway, everywhere, and more walking around in someone else's shoes. And just, there's nothing better that we could do right now for the world is to try to understand other stories and write them with our full hearts. That can change the world. It can. And sharing those stories, that can change the world because we can change hearts. We can also make people feel less alone because they'll feel like someone else gets it. Just like my own character got my situation. Like at least I had her. Yeah. So, I mean, I do think helps and it works telling stories.
All right. So if people want to read your first book, Pete and Alice in Maine, or your second book, which is The Gulf of Lions, where is the best place for them to find those books?
I would say, I mean, most independent booksellers will pre-order these books. They will send them to you. They'll hold them for you. I don't know when this is airing, but they will both be available at your local bookstore. Or of course, there's all the online bookstores too.
And where can people connect with you in particular online?
Instagram, my name, Caitlin Shetterly, or on my website, or yeah, I guess those two things.
All right. We will link to all of those in the show notes.
All right, cool. Thank you so much. It's
Yeah,
so
thank you
good.
for coming on the show.
Yes, definitely.
All right, everybody, that is it for today's episode. Thanks for joining us. And remember, the first draft is supposed to be garbage. The Novel Writing Podcast is a production of Colleen Mitchell Writes. For more writing resources, including Curios, Tally Inc. author services, and the 60-day novel writing challenge, check out the links in the description.